When we first started doing this work, the whole area of late life domestic violence was foreign. You know, society as a whole does not want to hear that grandpa batters grandma. They just don't want to go there. And so trying to penetrate anywhere in our society was very, very difficult at first.
Well, I work with all cultures, and they're all somewhat different. The African American, it's comes from slavery, the silent thing. It was an unwritten law that what goes on here stays here, and people kind of live with that, you know. Things went on in homes that nobody ever knew about because they really, that was something that was really honored, that what goes on in this house stays in this house. And it really wasn't known until someone was brave enough to go and talk to somebody, maybe another family member that didn't live in town, about that. And family would get together to try to make decisions about, you know, what is the best thing, because there were no places for them to go. And now, you know, there was no escape because the people had not been taught about abuse, because most people, seniors, really feel that abuse is only if, you know, hitting. They were not taught anything about verbal abuse, psychological abuse, mental, financial, and any of those things. That was just not something that they were aware of. And so when people were take advantage of them, so far as the money is concerned, they didn't see that as abuse.
And then I think you need also to know your history, realizing that the LGBTQ community is not one monolithic community. It's a whole constellation of communities within communities, and some people hold place in more than one of those communities. You know, I may be a lesbian of color, and I may be a lesbian and of color, and, you know, whatever. There's the fact that because we aren't this monolithic community, but we're small communities in, you know, communities within communities and that sort of thing, we're small. And if I have a partner who is abusive and I am getting old, and a lot of my friends have died or moved or that sort of thing, my community may be very small, and I may not have another place to go. And to go to a nursing home where I'm going to face, you know, censure, or particularly if I was trans, and in that situation, to go to a nursing home is, there's, you know, I'm not sure that I wouldn't rather be homeless, and that's kind of a death sentence for an old person, you know?
If we also look at the way the media portrays a victim of domestic violence, you know, what does she look like? She's often a younger woman with a black eye and a child tugging at her skirt, right? She's sitting there and she can't relate to that. She doesn't identify herself as that. Then there's the shame and the guilt. Tremendous, tremendous shame and guilt. It is not uncommon for an older woman to come to a group perhaps one time, maybe twice, and not come back again, because it is just too difficult for her to accept that her knight in shining armor, her Prince Charming, is actually the same person that is causing her all this hurt.
The advice that I will give is to be patient and don't get discouraged by the first failure, because working with refugees, it's a long process, and it involves a lot of challenges. There are a lot of situations that refugees are in that are, really, really important for them to take care of, which will be their basic needs. And then be careful not to introduce domestic violence subject just suddenly. Take your time, and it's a process that goes step by step.
It's hard. It was hard for me to start even sharing that part of my life because I never have. I always kept it all inside. But I had to start going there for a while until I get used to the people to be able to, be able to talk little by little with them to let them know what my life had been like. And then sometimes I find a friend in the shelter that I have been with around that I could feel like I could talk to.
If a woman is 62, she can apply for Social Security. By the time she's 65, she can get health insurance. She has Medicare. The problem for the victim between 50 and 62 and 65 is they have no medical care. They don't have Social Security. They don't have any kind of retirement. And so there are more of those challenges for that sort of notch group between 50 and 62.
What we have experienced with women over 50 is that the services are limited, especially when you're thinking about immigrant women that are new in the country who have less access, I will say, that the other community or the rest of the women, Latina women. We have to be very open and in listening to what they say about their own situations, because the limitations are it's a lot of limitations. It's a lot of barriers. Many women are monolingual. They may not speak English. The resources are very limited because most of the women we work with are undocumented. So the resources for women over 50 are limited in general. So just think about for Latinas who are new to the country, who may not have a legal status in the country, who may not know the system and do not know how to navigate the system. So we are very clear that we take each case as different. We definitely listen to what they wanted to do, and they may be very different than the rest of the women, just based on her own reality.
By looking at the clients we were serving, we found that many of them were returning to their abusers due to a lack of options. So we went back to the drawing board again and found, once again, that traditional transitional housing programs for victims of domestic violence are earmarked for women with children under the age of 18. Or if you were a single woman, you had to have a job or be in some kind of training program. Well, for many of our women that we were working with, at 67 years old, she wasn't ready to go to work. She wasn't going to go to school or, enroll in a training program. So she had no options, which is, again, we found time and time again.
It's different in all cultures because the one culture usually were pretty comfortable going to the priest. And some of the African American cultures, in that culture, they were somewhat reluctant to go to the pastor, which is, I was there 15 years and I only had 2 women that said that they felt comfortable enough to go to the pastor to talk about that. Because most of the time when people went to the pastor, the priest, the rabbi, or whoever they went to, they always told them to go home and be a good wife, which didn't solve any problem at all. And I found that in that area, it was difficult to get in the churches to even teach about abuse, especially in later life, And it's very sad, but it's very true. It's just a silence. You know, people have just condoned the silence.